Okay, we continue with verses summarizing the parameters of the 8 consciousnesses, and we're still talking on the first 5 consciousnesses, and hopefully we'll finish the first 5 consciousnesses today with a simple summary. So, last time we said we go to the 8th perspective, I think. How do the first 5 consciousnesses get to know and think about the perceived objects? How do our first 5 consciousnesses know about our external world? So basically, most of knowledge is from 3 sources. Knowledge from direct veridical perception, or knowledge from inference, whether it's true, or maybe false. In other words, from postulations, from analysis, from inference. Third, knowledge from fallacious reasoning. So if the inference is true, it becomes true. If it is false, it's fallacious. And in the first 5 consciousnesses fit into the first one. There's a 4th one too. There's a 4th one. Knowledge from saints and trustworthy source. So the first 5 fall into knowledge from direct veridical perceptions. They know by actually seeing, listening, tasting, so from actual perception. So then the next perspective that we look at is, how do we transform the first 5 consciousnesses into enlightenment? Spiritual transformation towards enlightenment. Now, to talk about that, we need to go back a little bit. Say, our consciousness is the conditioned mind. And then the absolute enlightened mind is the nirvana. It's going to nirvanic mind. So that's the absolute enlightened mind. So there are 2 minds. They are distinct minds, but then they are the same mind. It's different, but then it's the same. Because one mind evolved from the other. But the evolved mind, the final result is not the same as the beginning, the conscious, the conditioned mind. But you can say they are the same, but they are different. It's just like when you were young, when you were 18 years old, before, and then now you are 81, then you say, am I the same person? You're not the same person anymore. Now you're 81. The time when you were 18 is a different person. But then you say, it is the same. Because that person is the same person. So the conditioned mind, you don't blame the conditioned mind, because it's through the conditioned mind that you arrive at the enlightened mind. It's different, it's the same. But certainly, when you look at the final result, they're not the same. One is the purified one, and the other is still the conditioned, the fallacious, the subjective one. All right. So, samsara, the retribution process. We are in samsara now. We're going through life and death. We're going through reincarnations. After one life, we roll into the next life with our karmic energy. So we are in samsara. That's the Sanskrit language. Life and death, reincarnations. That's our retribution process too. That mainly occurs due to the ripening of the karmic seeds of the 8 consciousnesses that we have. So they mislead us to attach and crave to all objects of the external world through perception via the first 5 consciousnesses and their interaction with the internal 6 consciousnesses. The 7th consciousness believes in the self. You have that 7th consciousness and attaches to the karmic seeds of the 8th as its objects. Remember, we have the perceiving part and the part being perceived. The seventh consciousness in you perceive all these karmic seeds of the eighth as is external objects. The eighth consciousness, and then the first five, and then the sixth, and then the seventh consciousness. So these are responsible for all the retribution. These consciousnesses are responsible for our samsara. You have to be very careful with what you're doing. In order to get out from this, you really have to practice, not just the conceptual understanding. If you don't really gear yourself intensively to the practice, you just roll into the next round of reincarnation, then you may lose yourself, your true identity, and roll into the next round. We've all been suffering. Sometimes we may have temporary happiness, but we've all been suffering through. Sufferings in many ways. I hope you realize that this world is a world of suffering. We're not being negative. We're not being subjective. It's a fact. Suffering is a fact. It's not a postulation. It's not something that say, oh, you're negative, you're not positive. I'm positively understanding that suffering is prevalent in this world. I'm positively trying to remove suffering. I'm positively trying to understand this suffering so that I can get away from this suffering. Talking about it is not negative. But not talking about it, thinking that you're happy, you can enjoy life, you can do whatever you want as long as it pleases your senses, you get into suffering more and more and more and more. Because we are creating karmic energy. You don't know about it. You may not know about it. So, enlightenment requires an internal transformation of the consciousness into the great perfect wisdom, tainted, subjective, conditioned mind, how to turn it into absolute enlightened mind, into nirvana. That's what the Buddha has successfully done. He already have finished up the retribution process, and he wanted to tell us we can do the same thing by following the spiritual transformation. And he's been telling us in all the Tripitaka, the Vinaya, the Abhidhamma, and the Sutra. But how many people are actually following them intensively, wholeheartedly? They're still enjoying themselves in what they call quote-unquote happiness. Most of this happiness they think is pleasurable happiness. Happiness derived from satisfaction of the senses, or happiness derived from movement of the hormones. It's all hormones inside the body that moves around, that instigate around, and you think that's happiness. How do we do it? Spiritual transformation towards enlightenment. How about the first five consciousnesses? That's what we're talking about. We still have to talk about in detail the sixth one, the seventh one, and the eighth one. Now, the first five are easier to understand. How do we transform the first five? First of all, by conceptual understanding. Second is application. Just by understanding it won't get you too much, won't get you anywhere. It gets you to put your first step on the path of practice. But if you don't practice it, you're just like a professional student, always studying in a library. You study for your BA, and then your master, and then your PhD, and then your postdoc. All your lifetime is just studying. You are a professional seeker of conceptual understanding without walking it. In other words, you've been talking about going to Victoria, but you never take the ferry. You never started to drive. You can never get there. You're only talking about it on the map. You're only talking about it on the map. You never get there. And some people just satisfy themselves by just talking about it and trying to understanding it. And some people go around looking for books that they put on the shelf. They put 100 books of Buddhism on the shelf, and which one they have really finished in full and really follow it. And they put all kinds of videos. They go to all kinds of trying to only conceptual understanding. What they want is just a conceptual understanding without actually practiced it. You have to apply it. So there's two parts to it: conceptual understanding and application. And what is the conceptual understanding of it? By applying the Yogacara philosophy to everyday activities, we can replace subjective concepts with objective thinking about the consciousness. So your first conceptual understanding, you have to understand that your views, our views are tainted, are all polluted, are all egoistic. Our glasses are all biased. You know, we have an internal commentator in us, and that internal commentator is the constructs of that internal commentator is what? It's built according to your own karma, built according to your own personality. It's you, that internal commentator. You comment on everything subjectively according to what you think, and you never give up on that, and you continue to be like that. We, all of them are guided by precepts, samatha and vipassana, jie, ding, hui. Guided by precepts, observation, confirmations of the precepts. So that's the reason why the more precepts you have, the more you will be guiding to the right path, because you won't be creating new karma. If you don't have any precepts at all, in other words, you can kill, you can steal, you can have sexual misconduct, you can lie, you know, even though you meditate every day, you'll be too busy building up more and more karma. How can you get enlightenment? Some people, they practice 3-4 hours every day, but they continue to commit sexual misconduct, to be lying, to be stealing. You know, the morality is not getting any advancement, but they practice 5 or 6 hours per day. You think they will come up to a point that they get enlightened? They'll be too busy receiving a new form, new waves of retribution because of what they have built up in their karma. So it's very important that you have to, first of all, take your Vinaya. So whenever there's a novice monk, you know what the teacher, the master would tell a novice monk? For the first 5 years, spend all your time in studying the Vinaya. Don't go out and preach, oh, I know Buddhism. Don't go out to preach, because in your hidden personality, you're just looking for fame and reputation when you're preaching. You want to get praise that you're a good preacher. You want to get praise that you understand Buddhism. Internally, you're seeking, you're craving. But the Master said, spend your first 5 years in thoroughly understand the Vinaya and conform to the Vinaya. The more you conform to the precepts, the better monk you will be. The happier you will be. You have more freedom. Some people think that by being bound by all these precepts, you can't do this, you can't do that, I can't do anything. By being restricted from doing all these unwholesome precepts, you'll be more free. You have more freedom. You're free from the bondage of karmic energy bounding you. You're free to practice. So that's extremely important. So guided by precepts, first of all. And so if you haven't really taken the three refuges, you don't even have the first precept. Some people have learned Buddhism for years. They haven't taken the three refuges. Refuges under the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. That's the first precept. You haven't even taken that. And then of course you haven't taken the 5 precepts. Abstain from killing, abstain from lying, abstain from intoxicants and sexual misconduct, abstaining from etc., etc., the 5 precepts that you have to observe. And then you have to observe the 10 precepts. Then the person who is striving for enlightenment, then they become a monk. They have 250 precepts to conform to. And the nuns, the bhikshuni and the bhikshuni have 348 precepts to conform to. And then they get onto their path of practice. So precept, the samatha is concentration. Vipassana is wisdom. So they have to have the meditation and the wisdom. So precept, samatha, and vipassana. 戒, 定, 慧, 三无漏学. We will reduce the burden of our retribution if we're guided by all these. Stop creating unwholesome karma, nurture or build up wholesome karma, and gradually reduce our attachment to self and craving. So our first lesson, after we're guided by precepts of samatha and vipassana, is to what? Gradually learning how to eliminate the self. That's what the Diamond Sutra in the second chapter is talking about. Gradually eliminate your ego, yourself, the ego attachment, your craving. Everybody has that ego attachment. Some people are stronger than the others, and you may not know about it. You crave for something, you may not know about it. You're greedy for something, you may not know about it. That's been built in the ego. So conceptual understanding is absolutely important. But after having had the conceptual understanding, you really have to apply it. How do we apply it? How do we practice it? We have to get into details, but let me give you just the simplified version of the transformation according to the Yogacara approach. But we still have to, the application part, we still have to get in more and more and deeply into it. But we've been touching on the conceptual understanding. What is the confirmation? Transform the 6th consciousness into the wisdom of cognition. Transform the 7th consciousness into the wisdom of non-self. Transform the 8th consciousness into wisdom of great perfection of nirvana. Transform the first 5 consciousnesses into wisdom in helping all sentient beings in their final transformation. That really have to get into detail of it. So we've been studying on the last one, the first 5 consciousnesses. And the final result, to transform the first 5 consciousnesses into true wisdom. The first 5 consciousnesses exist based on the existence of the 8th consciousness. Now, this is quite important. The first 5 cannot exist without the 8th. So the first 5 consciousness, final transformation, has to be achieved when the 8th consciousness is successful in achieving wisdom of perfection of nirvana. It sounds very complicated. I don't know if you know what I mean. We've been jumping into conclusion right now. Let me give you an example. When a practitioner practice, changing the 6th consciousness into wisdom of cognition, changing the 7th consciousness into wisdom of non-self, and finally changing the 8th consciousness into wisdom of great perfection of nirvana, then the first 5 consciousnesses will change into wisdom in helping all sentient beings in the transformation. Why? Because when the Buddha achieved the great perfection of nirvana, then he has that ability to be reborn in many, many locations, many, many worlds, in many, many forms. So in other words, Avalokiteshvara or all Buddhas can be reborn, can be born in all the 6 reincarnations to help sentient beings. So in other words, some people translate the finality of the first 5 consciousness into what? into wisdom of successful performance in their act in helping all sentient beings to become Buddha. So in other words, the first 5 consciousnesses will be successful only when the great perfection of nirvana wisdom is achieved, and then he will be reborn in many places as Buddha, as Bodhisattvas, as Arahats, as in many, many places. He will be reborn in helping all sentient beings to transform into spiritual enlightenment. So the first 5 consciousnesses has to wait till the effect comes. Then it will be transformed. All the other 5 will be transformed in the cause of it. But the first 5 will be in the effect of it. This is difficult to understand. But anyway, I'm just giving you a summary right now. Transforming in the effect, transforming in the cause, in the causation is different.
With regards to the change that
Yeah.
transformation.
Yeah, transformation.
Cause and effect.
Yeah.
The first 5.
Effect, in the effect. So there's a saying, let me translate the saying. 六七因中转, the 6 consciousness, the mano consciousness, and the manas consciousness, the 7, they transform in the causation, transform in the causation. And 无霸果上缘, the first 5 consciousnesses and the 8 consciousness finally transform in effect of it, in the effect. Yeah, you understand? So that's something very difficult to understand. Even for those who study Yogacara, it's difficult to understand, not easily understandable. Yeah.
Because the 6th consciousness is the checkpoint of the change.
Yeah, yes.
It's where it all starts and then it comes back.
Exactly. You have to do the 6 first.
Gotcha.
You cannot get to the 8th and the 5 immediately. So gradually, you have to start from the 6 and 7. You change the 6 and 7, then the 5 and 8 will be changed. So there's certain procedures in doing it. Yeah. So you really have to start with the 6. The 6 is absolutely important. The 6 is very phenomenal. The 6 is really wild. It's going wild. You have to put the 6 under control first. So you have to change your 6. Changing your 6 is difficult, but it's interesting. I don't know if you find it interesting. If you find that the practice is interesting, you're on your way to nirvana. You find that the practice is boring, I better go eating, I better go playing, I better go doing something else that sets my senses, then you can't get anywhere. You have to be interested in it. Some people look at it, why would I have to study this? Yeah?
Would it be fair to say that the 6th cognition, the 6th consciousness, wisdom and cognition,
Yeah.
is tied to your point of view?
Yes, it's tied to your point of view, your internal commentator, all those karmic energies that you have had. So you have to change. The 6th is difficult to change. Yeah, when you can change your 6, the 7 is gradually changing. When the 6 and 7 is all changed, your 8th come into place, ready to be changed. And when the 8th is successfully changing, then the first 5 will be going out to enlighten all sentient beings in all kinds of forms, in all kinds of transformed bodies. That's the reason why we are lucky. We still can see the transformed bodies of the Buddha. The transformed body of the Buddha, 2,600 years ago, they could still see the Buddha. Because the Buddha has achieved the final great perfection of nirvana, and he was at the same time doing the wisdom in helping all sentient beings in their transformation. Finally. So, I have finished the first 5 consciousnesses in simplicity. And the reason why we have to study these is we have to know our consciousness. The first 5 are easy to understand because they are more simple, very simple. The 6th is very complicated. If you can deal with the 6th, which is the manager of all your senses, then you're on your way. You're on your way to annihilation of the self.